starting a new series on the channel called The State of the Show. The goal of this series is going to be me just having a conversation with you about the content, the gameplay, anything in regards to MLB The Show. I want to just discuss what I think is going well and what's going wrong with the game. And the goal of this series is to kind of engage a conversation about the game. Because at the end of the day, we love MLB The Show. A lot of you guys who watch my content feel that way, whether you're new to the game or if you're someone who's been playing it for years like me. Because a lot of times we play MLB The Show, but we don't really talk about what exactly is right or wrong with the game. You just kind of go about playing the game each day. And today, I want to talk about content. Our recent content that we've gotten in MLB The Show. Give my feedback on what's going right and wrong. Honestly, a lot of what's going wrong with it. And giving my critical feedback on some of the players like 99 Griffey and 98 Mickey Mantle, who are pretty underwhelming content drops, and trying to explain and understand why I think that's the case. If you enjoyed this, hit that thumbs up. Let me know in the comments if you guys want me to discuss anything else. I do want to upload this about once a week. But now let's hop on into the discussion on these cards. Overall, I think content has been great and fun in this game. I've had a lot of fun earning the cards, doing the BR programs, ranked programs, all that to get players. But there's some points of criticism here. I want to go through my feedback and what exactly is wrong with it and why I think the community is not really happy with a lot of the content we've gotten. And my goal is to not complain and just bash things. It's not my goal. I just want to give my honest feedback, and I want to try to encapsulate why I think the community doesn't like certain things in the game. It's not just to bash the game, just to bash it. But let's look at some of the players we've gotten recently and go through what I think is wrong. The dog days of summer, we got 98 Mickey Mantle, and you look at the attributes, and they're severely underwhelming. Mainly that contact versus right is the thing that makes the card tough to use. This card seemed to have gotten really boosted on the discipline and clutch, 125, 125, on two attributes that don't really do much, and they've said on dev streams where they don't do much. Feels like this card is a fluff, a waste of a card. I don't really see many people wanting to use this card in their team. Even if you like Mickey Mantle, like I'm a Yankee fan who wants to use Mickey Mantle, I don't think I can find a purpose, even on the all-time Yankees, to use this card. Before, we got Ken Griffey Jr., which was a absolute cluster of roasting on Twitter from the community, and it's probably with due reason. They hyped up this 99 Griffey program, and then we got this card with 85 contact versus left, which isn't entirely unusable, but there are a lot of other players that are significantly better. And if you've heard someone who's been playing the game all year, grinding content, there are a lot of cards that are even just 95 overalls that people would rather use in this card, which brings us around to the point I want to discuss with content. Why are these cards so underwhelming? What exactly is wrong with some of our mid-year content like these two players? And I want to try to encapsulate what's wrong with it, but also go through what I would personally be doing, make us feel a little bit better about our mid-year releases before the super endgame cards. So let's go back in time a little bit to the beginning of the year. We got 94 Willie Mays within the first couple months of MLB The Show 22, and this card isn't terrible, but by the time this card dropped, there wasn't much of an appeal for this card. Some people wanted to use face the franchise cards over him. 78 speed, 86 fielding is good, but not that good for Willie Mays card. And like 77 contact versus left felt a little low. People didn't use this Willie Mays card. I don't think I faced him more than like a couple times, even at that earlier part in the year where he was relevant. 94 Hank Aaron was the collection award that was available literally since day one. And again, I don't think I faced this card more than a handful of times at the beginning of the game. This 85 and 77 versus right just wasn't great. And imagine you complete the Braves collection and get this card. You're probably going to be using Ronald Acuna on your team over this card anyway. Still, like, it's a little bit slower for a Hank Aaron card with 67 speed. And, like, it's just like, it doesn't feel like a Hank Aaron card because it doesn't have any power. This Ken Griffey Jr. was the first Ken Griffey Jr. we got. And the card was somewhat usable at the very, very beginning of the game. Like, when the game literally just dropped. This is the first card that we got. And the 99 Griffey is the last card we got since this. And again, like, this card was maybe on teams for the first couple weeks for many people. And that was probably it for the large case of people. You remember they had the Lou Gehrig day and they had that Lou Gehrig program and then they released this card? I don't think I saw this card used on teams once. It was like, why the 71 power versus righties? Like, it was cool they did a Lou Gehrig day program to celebrate Lou Gehrig, but like, did people really use this card? And listen, I don't want to just roast these cards to roast them, right? But the point I'm trying to make is that you're sensing a theme, right? Whenever we got non-99 versions of these big name players, they've been pretty typically underused and underwhelming. And I think they're intentionally doing that, and I think that's part of the problem with our mid-year diamonds in MLB The Show. You know, we all like Willie Mays and Hank Aaron and Ken Griffey Jr. Like, they're very fun legend players in the show. But at the end of the day, if the card doesn't have attributes that people want to use in their teams, the card doesn't feel exciting to use. It just feels like a waste of a card. And it's okay if the player is not the best player in the game at that current point in the game. But like, people are just gonna stick usually with the player with the best attributes. Those mid-year diamonds don't get touched at all. So it's just like, why even release them at that point? They aren't making teams and people aren't wanting to use them if the attributes are severely underwhelming like they are. The cards aren't well-rounded enough. Like, people want to use these players on their teams, not only for their namesake, but they want like good, well-rounded attributes, and these cards don't really live up to that hype. But I think there are points where MLB The Show has released mid-year diamonds for these players that worked out well, because there have been points where we've gotten mid-year diamonds for big-name MLB The Show players that people actually want to use in their teams. We got 96 Ken Griffey Jr. last year, and if you remember, this was just before the All-Star Game content. And at that point in the game, these attributes were well-rounded enough where people felt like it was warranted to run them on their team. It's the end of August now, and we got a Griffey with actually pretty similar contact in his card versus the one side at least. Also last year, we had this Mickey Mantle, who also had lower contact versus right, which isn't a big deal. But when he was released, this was before the Ken Griffey Jr.'s, this was over a month before All-Star Game content. The 70 contact was at least appealing enough when you had 118 and 125 versus left at parallel to. And the point is, at the very least, if you're gonna release a card like this, release it at the right time in the year where there's enough appeal, or just give us a Ken Griffey Jr. where it was actually a well-rounded enough card. It wasn't the best card at this point in the game, not even close, but it was good enough where people were like, hey, I could actually run this card on my team. This card seems really fun. People felt like he played above the attributes because Ken Griffey Jr. And funny enough, this year, we actually had already one instance of a very good middle of the year diamond release for a big name MLB The Show player, and that was Babe Ruth. He still is on my team, for example, because it's a good hitter like you would expect a Babe Ruth card to be. He's not the best card. Matt Carpenter, for example, has more power. He brings more power to the table. Austin Riley's a more viable outfielder used because of his better defense. He's not the best outfielder by any means. This card has a want to be used on teams, so at the very least, I could wait longer for a 99 Babe. So I've got this one that is interesting enough for me to use. Thing is, it seemed like this one worked out is because they put him into the Takashi collection, which is a little bit more expensive. He was a little bit better than some of the other content that we got at that point in the game, because he was an expensive collection. You had to collect a bunch of Takashi cards, which cost a good amount of stubs. So that's why I think it worked out. But when you have a card that was like pretty easy to earn, like a headliner, like with our other cards like Griffey and Mantle in the other games, or like a player program or feature program card, a lot of the cards have been duds. So based off of Babe Ruth and Ken Griffey Jr. last year, I think what SDS should consider is when you're releasing mid-year diamonds for these players, try to find a way to make them viable. Take their 99s and what their 99s would look like, and basically tone it down just a little bit to fit in that point in the game. Give them like a scaled down version of what their 99 would be that fits in that current point in the game. So it plays like, you know, a higher overall version of their card would be, but just slightly worse on the attributes so it doesn't last super long in the end game, and maybe it isn't too overpowered at that point in the game. This is the type of thing that I think they should have considered doing with that 94 Hank Aaron. A card like this, if it was like a collection award, one of the earlier cards in the game, it would have been a nice beginning of the game card. 85 and 90 contact was fine at that point in the game. But you see, since it's Hank Aaron, and you know, he's this dude that had like the all-time home run record, maybe you give him slightly more power than the contact, so he's that well-rounded outfielder type that people want, but you just make him the power type hitter, so he plays with a little bit more power. And then maybe with Willie Mays, you make him the same exact overall or something similar, but you make him well-rounded in the attributes, the good contact, the good power, good defense. Maybe you find a way to give him the better defense than the hitting overall, because it is Willie Mays, arguably the best fielder in center field of all time. You see, this is a well-rounded card, and if this card were to drop like a month into the game, people would have actually considered using this card with around 90 hitting attributes. I'm not saying they should use the exact attributes, but make it something like that, where the player is well-rounded or built something like this. And again, I think this draws more appeal because the players are well-rounded, and they're good enough to use that point in the game, but with those attributes, they wouldn't be super overpowered. There would be other players that bring more contact, more power, better defense, but at the very least, if you want the well-rounded and you're willing to take a slight hit in attributes, not much, but just a little bit, but at least find some usability out of the cards, I think at this point, you'd have a good middle of the year diamond for players like this. Maybe the first month of the game, you release Hank and Willie Mays, and the next month you release Ken Griffey Jr. as like a mid diamond, then you release a Mickey Mantle. Like, you mix them up and you give them lower overalls bit by bit as the game is progressing forward. You get to 97 overalls, and like, I don't know, maybe it's like the second Mickey Mantle diamond and it ends up being a 97. Then you stop releasing them until around the end game. You can make them the 97s, release them right about the All-Star break, right around where we get our All-Star game content with our other players, the halfway point in the year. And then, you know, at that point, since it would be a couple months down the road, like mid-September, early September, you could start to release the really good 99 overall versions for these big name players. And at that point in the game, you're getting those good 99s in our hands earlier on. We don't have a scenario like last year where we're waiting till like October for a 99 Ken Griffey Jr. that people actually want to use in their team. In many scenarios, we don't have a card that people actually want to use on teams until we get their really good 99. And I think that's a bad part of the game, and what I think is a general theme with a lot of middle of the year content. It really shows itself with the big named players in MLB The Show because of how much we beg for their really good 99s. We're gonna see finest cards at the end of the season, postseason cards, all of that. And we're gonna be waiting seemingly a while for our big named players in the game, and it really sucks. It's a constant problem with the game, and especially with how slow progression has been in this year's game. They've really been trying to creep up overalls slowly this year, which I've been cool with. It feels like it's off to have so many good players released so late in the year. Last year, a lot of community feedback was that some cards were too good. They never left people's lineups. Guys like Trey Turner, Jacob deGrom, Edward Cabrera were used everywhere, and some cards played way better than they should have been. So it feels like this year, since they are progressing slower with content, they've made a lot of the middle of the year content mid. Cards aren't great. If you remember our All-Star Game program, I honestly think only about 5 of the cards were well-rounded enough to be used on teams. And it's also been the case with our Legends like we discussed today. And it's definitely a theme of content this year. They're scared to make too many cards well-rounded and viable. So we still have that problem where people are still using cards for a while. Like, a lot of people still use Ketel Marte on teams because there aren't enough hitters that they can find that are worth the replacement. But yeah, overall content has been good in MLB The Show, but these are just my thoughts on middle of the year diamonds leading up to the end game diamonds for a lot of our bigger named players in MLB The Show. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with some of the points that I made. But I love discussing aspects of the game and sharing feedback and trying to gauge what is going well or wrong with the game. But we'll be back with another gameplay video tomorrow, and I'll see you all again on the next one tomorrow. Deuces.